What boat is that, do you know?
Oh, the HMS. No, never mind.
Challenger.
The
Beagle.
Oh, the Beagle. Darwin, also a famous naturalist.
Had a beetle collection.
Had a huge beetle collection.
He loved the Beatles.
10 points if you can tell me from the reading what important organism did he make discoveries about in marine biology?
Wait, leave it behind.
Yes, Green is correct. Okay, I'll give it away. Pink is correct.
This is my hoop mixtape.
Yes, blue is correct.
Biology mixtape.
Hoop mixtape.
Orange, I'm glad I didn't say banana. Orange is correct. Purple's correct. Coral, he made coral discoveries. You put iguana, I give that to you. He did talk about them. There was his trip. How long was he on the Galapagos? Y'all remember?
2 weeks.
A couple of weeks. Charles Thompson, did we talk about him?
A little bit.
A wee bit.
Challenger expedition?
Yes.
They're the ones that dug up stuff from the bottom of the ocean. Let's take a look at video of that.
Ancient aliens. Let's freaking go. Ancient aliens.
Portsmouth, England, December 21st, 1872. The HMS Challenger sets out on a 3-year scientific expedition to survey the Earth's oceans and search for new marine life. At the time of its departure, the mainstream scientific viewpoint is that life cannot exist more than 1,800 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. But in March of 1875, after more than 2 years at sea, the crew of the HMS Challenger makes a remarkable discovery. Using a deep-sea dredge, they uncover an abundance of life at depths well beyond 1,800 feet.
Every time they dredged the waters of the ocean, they kept bringing up weirder and weirder creatures at deeper and deeper levels. It quickly became apparent that the oceans are teeming with life.
Throughout time, we tend to sort of impose our own limitations and our own perspectives on sort of our view of the universe, right? And so our idea of the deep ocean was similar to that too. We thought that probably nothing else could live at great depths because we certainly couldn't survive. Our bodies couldn't take the pressure. Sort of biased, I think, our interpretation of life in the deep ocean.
They found over 4,700 different types of new life. It was a wealth of data so vast that it filled 50 volumes with 30,000 pages of information and was essentially a scientific revolution for its time.
And it was fascinating that it only was 5 scientists, 220 plus crew, only 5 scientists. And only 5 scientists in about 3 years, they made oceanography. They made a modern science. And the reason for that, why they did it, is because they blindly go where no man goes before. And this is what scientists should do.
Isn't that cool? I remember when I was a kid, you know, they have only charted all the depths of all the oceans relatively recently. I remember when I was a kid, younger than y'all, maybe like 10 or 12, asking, I think it was my dad, I was like, you know, what's under the ocean, you know, what's down there? And then he's like, well, they don't really know everywhere. They haven't looked everywhere. And recently we've got sonar. Do y'all know what that is? Where it bounces radio waves off the bottom. So they've recently, by bouncing sonar and riding boats around everywhere, have charted the depths of all the oceans everywhere. But they didn't used to know that. That's only been done in the last 20 or 30 years. And now at least we know the depths of everything. They haven't been down there to look at everything yet. They don't know what's living at each location or anything like that. They've only been down to the bottom of the ocean in a few places to look around. They have these deep sea submersibles that'll go down there like submarines, remotely operated vehicles, and they look around in some places, but they haven't looked everywhere. It's kind of an uncharted territory. So that thing he was doing when they were dropping the dredge and digging things up, that was the first anyone ever really discovered what was on the bottom of the ocean. Nobody knew. Isn't that cool? It's like undiscovered stuff. No one knew what was down there. Now they have a better idea, but they still don't know for sure. So Charles Wyville Thompson, he led that expedition. That was a pure science expedition, by the way. It wasn't for any other reason. The ones before this, Darwin's expedition and Cook's voyages, those were really not for just the science. They were to map and plunder and find new discoveries on land. They weren't just for ocean. But Thompson's expedition was just to see what was in the ocean. So that was the first real science mission, 1872. And there's where he went. Went all over the place. Now, when I was your age, I used to watch a show called something like The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, or The Underwater World of Jacques Cousteau, or something like that. This guy made one of the first science TV shows that existed. A long time ago, they didn't have science on TV all the time. Now they got the Science Channel and National Geographic channel and History Channel shows some science stuff. And they got all these different shows you could watch about science. Well, that didn't exist either when I was y'all's age. There was only a few shows on TV, and this guy's was one of them. Jacques Cousteau. He's famous in that he invented scuba. You know what scuba is? Well, you put on the tank and you put on the thing. He was the first guy to ever do that. He came up with the idea that you could take a tank of compressed air and you could attach it to your mask, and he came up with some of the equipment to be able to breathe that air. What's the name of the device? A regulator. He invented the regulator to be able to take in the right amount of air from the tank. How many here have a scuba diving license?
My brother does.
Your brother does? You do? How often do you go?
Like once a year.
Did you go this summer?
Not this summer.
No. You need to go more. I never got one either, but I'd like to. Where have you been?
The Turks and Caicos, Isla Morada, Key Largo. I definitely don't want to do it around here, like the water's so bad.
The water's too muddy. Yeah.
You have to go out really far if you want to do it here.
We also have strong currents, really strong currents. We'll talk more about why our currents are strong. But this guy invented scuba diving so you could actually go underwater and look around. No one had ever done that before him. They lowered people down inside submarines that have windows, and you could do that, but it's not the same as scuba, being able to go in and out of little cracks and crevices and crawl around and look at things. He was the first one that ever did that. He took cameras with him, and he took a lot of pictures and video, and he decided, I want to share this with the world, and so he started making TV shows. He wrote several books, put pictures in his books, and then started making TV shows. And he was kind of famous, and we would watch him as a kid. And this was all new stuff. No one had pictures of what was under the water, or especially video, before his scuba diving.
This is the Jacques Cousteau most people would recognize. The man in the wetsuit, air tank strapped to his back, heading overboard. It was a routine he repeated over and over again, hundreds, perhaps thousands of times over his long and adventure-filled life. But less known was that Cousteau was an inventive genius.
I remember most that he was enchanted with ideas, that he was delighted. He was almost like a little child, but he was the most creative and imaginative person I've ever met.
Susan Schiefelbein was for more than 2 decades a close collaborator with Cousteau and helped him write his autobiography.
A scientist who would be very involved and have a passion in his work could go to Cousteau and say A, B, and Cousteau could skip to Q and understand immediately the intervening steps.
The Frenchman practically invented scuba diving when he developed the regulator valve that made possible breathing air from tanks underwater. Apart from the scuba equipment, which he called an aqualung, Cousteau was perhaps best known for his underwater photography. His stunning documentaries produced for television and cinema had their origins in the adventurer's childhood curiosity.
He wanted a Navy and aviation career and went to the Naval Academy at Brest and did extremely well. And then was in a car accident and was too terribly hurt ever to be a pilot. And so he was strengthening himself by swimming, and he became a naval explorer kind of by default.
If he came to diving by accident, it was a fortunate accident indeed, because it led Cousteau to a lifelong search to find out what lies beneath the surface of the world's oceans.
Jacques Cousteau's endless curiosity led him to explore ever more remote, ever deeper waters. He needed something which could withstand extreme water pressure, yet maneuver silently like a diver can without disturbing the aquatic life around it. Submarines wouldn't do because of the turbulence and danger caused by the propellers. Nothing like he had in mind existed, so Cousteau had to invent it.
He pulled out a saucer from under a coffee cup and then put another one on top, and he said something like this.
Cousteau very often insisted on testing his new devices and techniques himself, frequently risking his own life in the process.
Here was a man who took
Remember the TV show?
These devices down enormous steps, not having any idea what would happen. And so it was really trial and error in a very dangerous sense. And he always survived.
But for Cousteau, survival of the environment is what was really important. In the 1960s, he helped stop underwater dumping of nuclear waste in the Mediterranean Sea and helped restrict commercial whaling in the 1980s. He wanted to protect the world he so enjoyed exploring.
If somebody said, what do you expect to see at the bottom of the Romanche Trench, which they were the first to photograph, he would say, if I knew what I expected to see, why would I go? Why would I even look? And so it was à l'Ivoire.
À l'Ivoire, go see. Advice Cousteau himself followed until the end. Jim Betterman, CNN, Paris.
So you remember that show?
Oh, God,
when we
Sunday
were
night, 8
kids?
o'clock. Yes, of course.
So I was telling the kids that back then they didn't have, what were the other science shows other than Jacques Cousteau? There was like National Geographic.
The National Geographic, when they had the guy that would chase around, they'd always be, and Jack Kennedy be pulling like the snake out of the river, and you're always afraid he's going to get killed.
Other than those two, that might have been the only one.
Steve Irwin.
And then, do you remember Cosmos with Carl Sagan? That was a little later.
There are billions and billions of stars out there. Yes. That, and then This Week in Baseball. That was pretty much it.
So this guy was big, trailblazer, as far as the getting marine biology out to the public. And then I guess he died in the late 80s, I think. But people my age and older have a memory of him because of watching that show. And back then, see, they didn't have many channels. They had 3 channels. They had ABC, NBC, CBS. You probably heard this story from your parents. And then TBS came around a little later. But with only 3 channels, you kind of watch whatever's on.
I heard the Lone Ranger played all the time.
Yeah, Lone Ranger. That was even before my time. In the 60s and 50s. So now, going from Jacques Cousteau, they've come with a lot of modern research facilities. There are marine biology labs all over the country. There are big ones and small ones. We have a small one in Brunswick, and I'm going to try to take you there sometime this semester. I've sent an email to them asking if we can come see. It's called the MAREX Lab, Marine Extension Service. It's funded by the University of Georgia, and they have a lab in downtown Brunswick. It's by by the dock there, where the boats come in and out. If you go down Gloucester all the way to the end, you know there's water. That's where this research is. There's a little research lab. They have a shrimp boat that's been outfitted to do scientific research. They've got all kinds of equipment on it. They can drop nets out and pull the nets and capture things and study them. Have you ever heard of a TED device? TED? TED stands for Turtle Exclusion Device. So they noticed about 20, 30 years ago that the sea turtles were all dying out. Y'all heard about this? And they wondered why were the sea turtles all going extinct so fast, and one of the main reasons were because shrimp boats were catching sea turtles in their nets. And scientists in Brunswick came up with a device to allow sea turtles to get out of the nets and not get pulled up by these big shrimp nets. So when the sea turtle gets in the net, there's a little escape hatch that the turtle can find to get out. That was perfected here. And they used their boat to test the nets, the different devices. And they finally came up with a couple different devices that worked, and you could release the turtles without losing all your shrimp. And without losing much shrimp at all. And they actually pulled and they tested and they figured out how much shrimp was lost because of the turtle exclusion device, and they got it where it wasn't hardly any at all. And then they got the lawmakers to make it law that shrimp boats had to have these turtle exclusion devices on their nets. And that happened here. Isn't that cool? Yeah. So I'll try and take you to that Merex lab to show you their lab. But we've done some good work here. And there's other marine research labs all over the country. This is the most famous one is called Woods Hole. It's in Massachusetts. And if you want to be a marine biologist and you're one of the top people in the country, that's where you probably end up, Woods Hole. That's what it looks like from the outside. They have a bunch of boats. They have buildings. They have labs inside the buildings. This is a look at it. All this right here is all Woods Hole Marine Institute. All this area here. And they have big ships. There's where it is. If you're wondering, if you know your way around up there, Woods Hole is right. It's in Massachusetts here. There's other ones. There's one called Scripps in California. Scripps Institute. That's another big one. A lot of the stuff in this in our book is taken from studies that they've done. There's one in Washington State called Friday Harbor. This is a picture of some of their stuff. That's also Friday Harbor, looking at the buildings along with that. So there's several big marine biology institutes. So if you want to become a marine biologist, and just because you're taking marine biology, I don't expect you all to become marine biologists, but if you wanted to do that, you end up working at these institutes, working in their labs, going out on their boats, doing research. There's all sorts of research going on in marine biology. We'll talk about that as we go through this course. There's the scuba apparatus. The reading talks about the scuba, and of course, Jacques Cousteau came up with that. Do you know what scuba stands for? You should know that if you're going to be in a marine biology class. Does anyone know?
Self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, if I remember it right.
Very nice. Absolutely right. Self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. That's something you should know.
10 points.
Scuba is that. Now this is an ROV. Now ROVs stands for Remotely Operated Underwater Vehicle. And this is like it's kind of like a video game. They lower that thing down, you control it with a joystick or a mouse, and you have a screen that you're looking at from the boat, and you drive that thing around, and you can take it anywhere. Some of them are attached to the boat with a cable so you don't lose it, and some of them go unattached, and hopefully you won't lose it. But anyway, this cable can provide power and make sure you can pull the thing back. These are device like this found the Titanic. Y'all heard about the Titanic sank and it was lost. When I was y'all's age, no one knew where it was, and it was finally found. And then they drove one of these down there, and where they had seen some blips on their sonar that might be a ship. They drove that thing down there and had a camera and looked around and could see it said Titanic on the side and everything. I mean, they found the thing. And took a bunch of pictures, and a lot of the pictures, video they took with these RVs were used in the movie Titanic. Have y'all seen that movie? It's kind of old now, but it was like the biggest movie of ever, yeah, for a while at least. Let's see one of these things at work. Let's skip that now. This is just kind of... trench diggers. You know, if you want to get internet and you want to communicate with people overseas or make phone calls, all that goes through undersea cables. They'll dig trenches on the bottom of the ocean, bury these cables running across the ocean, and they can use ROVs for that. stuff. We're going to talk more about all the technology. That's the next chapter, is all the, one of the upcoming chapters, all the different types of technologies there are out there for studying under the ocean. But that's how it's advanced, kind of the history of marine biology. I've left out many. I mean, you could talk about a whole lot of other guys too, but these are kind of the main guys. So make sure you've read that. And here's the deal: there could be a quiz over Chapter 1. There will be. I'll go ahead and tell you, there's going to be a quiz over Chapter 1 on Monday.